Thank y'all all so much for coming back upstairs. How was y'all food? Good. Ate good. Okay. Love to hear it. Um, we're just gonna give everybody a few minutes to make sure that they all get back up here. I see everybody trickling in. Whew, I'm good. I'm full. Oh, thank you. I got it. Yeah, I went to Alabama. Okay. Me too. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. All right. So, before we jump into the last portion of our day, I do just want to take some time to give a special thanks and shout out to our food ministry for the amazing breakfast and the lunch. Um, and also to Brother Ben right here from Amazona's Pizza. If y'all had any of that delicious pizza downstairs, uh, Sister Maya and I went out flyering earlier this week in the community, and as soon as we gave him the flyer, he was like, "I'll be there." And so not only did he show up, but he also showed out. So we just want to give you love and say thank you so much. All right.
Great. Okay, I want to say hopefully everyone had a great time at the lunch break. We're going to move right back into our second session, and we are honored today to have a true voice of the people, an advocate for the well-being of our community, one who's making a difference, who's having a tremendous impact throughout our city councilwoman, Sister Carol Fife. We're going to bring her forward. Please have a seat here, and we're going to engage in meaningful dialogue and discussion today. And I want you to give her your undivided attention. And let me just say this. In times like these, you need people with vision. You need people with a strong backbone. You need people who can take the heat and keep pressing forward. We need people who are willing to overcome obstacles and don't let objection and criticism deter them. And so today we are honored to have such a person in our midst, in our Councilwoman Carol Fife, my sister and friend. So we're getting ready to get into this conversation. Um, I'm gonna sit over there next to you in 1 second, but let me just begin here with this. Open up with this. As you are aware, Councilwoman Fife, um, you have to engage in so much in our community, and I think it'd be good for our community to hear from you. Um, why, why did you get into this role as City Councilwoman? I mean, you have been slandered, you have received threats, you have received racial epithets hurled at you. You have received slanderous statements, misinformation, and you have endured a lot. And I guess somebody would say, why would you take on a job like this and endure all of this? So why don't you share with us? And I'm gonna come over and sit next to you.
Well, first of all, I appreciate this opportunity to come and share some of the things that I've experienced, but I want to be really clear. This is not about me. This is not even about the people who are slandering me, the death threats. None of that is relevant. It really is most important. How well do we get done what's needed in our communities? And that's what I'm here to do. So if I have to make some enemies and crush a few eggs trying to make this omelet, then that's what I'm gonna do. But the reason I got into this work, which I said I would never do, honestly, I worked on a mayoral campaign in 2014, and since then people are like, well, when are you gonna run? And I used to say that I'm never going to run for office. And now being on the inside and seeing how slowly things work and how things move, I'm like, yeah, I understand. Well, I used to say that back in the day. But honestly, I was voluntold. And so I ran because there were several people in the community that asked me to do so. I honestly was having quite a bit of success in achieving my organizational objectives at the place that I worked at. I was working as the director for the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, and I was the director. I'd been there for 4 years, and we were winning campaign after campaign, not just for our individual members. We are a membership-based organization that was fighting for job security, housing justice, and a host of other things, city services, and we were winning. We were keeping people housed. There were people who were getting foreclosed on. We would turn those around, people who were getting illegally evicted. We changed those things. But consistently, there were people asking to do something different, drastically different around housing. And I remember I was really, really sick on Juneteenth of 2020. And it was recently, headline news where a young man was killed in East Oakland by the California Highway Patrol. And so a group of young people that I was working with and mentoring around community organizing, asked me to help them plan some marches and rallies, and they reached out to the Community Ready Corps, and we helped them. And I remember on Juneteenth at DeFermery Park, they had just finished painting the street that said All Black Lives Matter, and it was at that rally at Little Bobby Hutton Park that they said, Mama Carol, we know a lot of people have been asking you to run in November of this year, and we want to give you the permission to do that, because we know if it's left up to you, you'll keep telling people no. And we need you to do that. We'll make sure that folks keep organizing in the streets for justice, but we need that same advocacy on the inside. And so I was like, the babies asked me to, I'm gonna run.
Wow, let's put our hands together for Carol Fife. Councilwoman Fife, as we have discussed throughout this day, and we have heard from many voices from within our community, raising concern about the crime rate and the crimes that are being committed in the city of Oakland. My question to you would be, what do you see as the causes for the crimes rate spiking, particularly in
the West Oakland community and throughout the city,
I,
particularly for our businesses and the personals?
I don't believe that there's one cause, but I will say some of the information and the history that I pull on around poverty stem from the Poor People's Campaign that Dr. Martin Luther King was working on almost a half a century ago, over a half a century ago. So these issues that we're facing are not new. And the reality for people like me is that there have been activists throughout our entire history. There have been slavery abolitionists. There have been people fighting for women's rights and students' rights. And for decades, we've been saying if you do not address the core and root issues of poverty and helplessness that exist with marginalized communities, then that's going to turn into something else. So this information about people being in despair and in need is not new, but I have been an organizer for my entire adult life since I was 21 years old, and I'm getting older now. So the reasons that we're seeing these things are because people feel a sense of despair. They feel a sense of alienation from the larger community. We have a culture that is based in materialism and consumerism that glorifies wealth, but we also glorify instant gratification. So folks don't want to necessarily work for things to be able to save and achieve them. It's, I want it now, and I'm going to get it now by any means necessary. And that desperation is not something that is born into people, it's nurtured. So when I talk about crime, I'm not just talking about the little c crime that is having so much impact on our communities right now. The big crime to me is creating and continuing a culture that glorifies and exemplifies lack, greed, no care for your neighbor. That is the big C crime. The big C crime that can take an entire community, like the Black and the brown community with the foreclosure crisis, and take people's homes from them and make them homeless, and then get bailed out by our government. Those are big C crimes that never go addressed. But what happens is we have a wave of people who used to own their homes now renting, and then we see rents go up every single year. But you know what doesn't go up every single year? Wages, right? Wages have not kept pace with inflation since the 50s. So every year, well, we got to pay more in rent, we're making less in wages, which is why we've seen record strikes across the country. In America, places where people have right to work, where you can't even go on strike, are striking because they are working for minimum wage or barely above minimum wage. There is not one city in the United States of America where you can make minimum wage and afford a one-bedroom apartment to rent. Not one city in America. And people wonder why. And what you're hearing on the news right now is woke Democrat policies are why crime is on the rise in places like California, but they're not telling you about places in Mississippi and Louisiana and Tennessee and places, Texas, in red states where crime is also on the rise because people do not care anymore. They're like, forget it. My public education didn't work for me. These dead-end jobs are not working for me. So I'm gonna get it. And I don't care if I hurt you to do it. So when we talk about crime, we can't just talk about the little c crime that hurts us on a daily basis. We gotta talk about the big C crime in our culture that manifests those conditions to make that reality possible. So when I talk about public safety, and you'll hear Carol wants to be soft on crime and nurture criminals, they're saying that because they're taking words out of context. I was a teacher before I was in politics. I taught little babies how to read. I was credentialed at Holy Names University to teach K through 8. And I know that those are some of the most critical times in human development. It's between 0 and 5. So if we nurture the heck out of kids between 0 to 5 and make sure they have all of the resources that they need to thrive, we will see all of this stuff start to end. If we have housing that's affordable and available to people, we will see this thing end. And so you can miss me with it's this woke Democrat system that is why crime is on the rise in Oakland and all of our legislators. No, this system is broken. And people are like, she's an anarchist and she wants to tear down the system. I absolutely do. Because it's not broken. It's designed to do exactly what it's doing. In 1994, our federal government passed a crime bill. And inside that crime bill was $10 billion for prisons, to construct prisons, to build prisons that did not exist, right? So if you're gonna build prisons that don't exist, how are you gonna fill them? How are you gonna get those investors paid to make that make sense? To make that make sense, dollars and cents. Then you gotta have some conditions that push people into prisons. So what I'm saying is if we break that system that is designed to put people behind bars, then we can have the beloved community that we deserve. So if that makes me soft by dealing with the realities of trying to build a community where people thrive and want to live, have a desire to live, then call me what you want to call me. Threaten me how you want to threaten me, because that is my mission, is to change the culture so the babies that I've taught to read have a future to live in. I am sorry, sir. I did not mean to be on from here.
No, that's perfect. That's great. That's great. No, that's great. I just want to kind of piggyback on that. Excuse me, as you were speaking, and we are aware of the industrial prison complex and the privatization of prisons and the investment that was made into building more prisons. And then when you start talking about we have to fill those prisons to make good on that investment, for people to materialize. So what are we creating? And that's why I opened up today with, let's be conscious of the narrative. True, we agree, things are out of control. We agree that there's a lot of lawlessness in our city. But we also got to be careful about this whole new mindset of getting tough on crime again. Because the tough on crime that was advocated in the 1990s, we watched firsthand how it disproportionately impacted black and brown men. And then 30 years later, we get an apology that we're so sorry we did that. That's right. So now we got to be careful that we don't repeat that same mistake. So as we talk about solutions, and that's why I'm glad to have Councilmember Fife here today, let's think through this process. Let's think through this process. And we understand, as Reverend Demeter said earlier, we try different options, and if we get to the end and there's no change in actions or behavior, we do know some people are going to get locked up, let's be candid. Some people are going to go to jail, and then, to be quite candid with you, some people need to go to jail. But we also need to address a bigger issue. Why is there so many guns in our city? No, let's keep it real. Why are there so many guns in the city of Oakland? Why is everybody packing? Everybody's packing. I mean, everybody's packing. I pastor right here in the lower bottoms. Everybody's packing. By my house last night, guns going off. Everybody's packing. The folks walking their dogs, watch how they walk their dogs. They're carrying a leash in the left hand and a hand in the right pocket. Everybody's packing. No matter what color you are, everybody's packing. So why is there so many guns in our city? And also we have to address the issue, a lot of guns are in the hands of the wrong people. So one of the things we're going to talk about before we conclude is how do we get some of these guns off our streets. My next question to you, Councilmember Fife, is in light of all that's going on and your ear is to the ground, you're actively engaged in this work, what are your priorities for public safety for the city of Oakland?
Well, my goals around public safety are to get people to understand that there's a spectrum of public safety. You mentioned that some people need to go to jail. And I didn't hear Cantrell mention it today, but the Director of Violence Prevention has mentioned it in the past, that sometimes when people are arrested, that's the only time, and sometimes the first time, they come into contact with being able to have access to resources. And so those sometimes are the resources that can determine if you're going to continue to go down this path or you're going to make a turn. So I agree that sometimes you got to get people, grab them, and get them in a place where they can have access to the therapy that they never had, that they've always needed, or a host of other resources that healthy societies would provide, but this one does not. So one of my goals is to expand the definition of public safety, so it's not just what happens when it's time to punish someone for doing something wrong, but to have a holistic understanding that along the spectrum of public safety is also how is an individual safe. I worked at a school in Los Angeles called Hillside's Home for Children. And it was a residential facility that also was a school, a public school for kids who had been removed from their homes because of severe abuse. I had never experienced anything like this in my life because I have been blessed from the time that I came here, from some parents that were from the South. My grandparents moved during the Great Migration and were able to give my parents a very good life, which, you know, trickled down to me. These kids, I met a child who had been chained to the floor in a closet and not fed, starved until she was emaciated. So when she came to the school, she developed an eating disorder where she would just eat and eat and eat because she had been so starved, like literally. I met a child who was beaten so severely, he lost his ability to speak. I met a child who was 8 years old who had been so sexually abused by his stepfather that he tried to kill him in his sleep and burn down his apartment complex twice on 2 separate occasions. So there is so much trauma in people's lives that you don't know by looking at them. You don't know who's been through what. And so my goal about public safety is to say, how are we taking care of our children? How are we taking care of our seniors? The number of seniors that are living homeless on Oakland streets is unconscionable. And it breaks my heart to know that that just became a concern for people when they start seeing it. I've been fighting for years to keep seniors and young people off the streets and keeping people in their housed. But now, because people didn't listen to me when I was the director of a nonprofit that worked for those services, Miss Marilyn knows, because it was not made a priority when it was not an epidemic, then now we have what we have. And now we're in crisis. Y'all listen to activists before it becomes a crisis. Now, when things are in crisis, you don't have as many options, but it's still more affordable to deal with prevention than it is to deal with punishment. And like my people are from the South, don't get me wrong, I believe in consequences. That's how I was raised. And you have to raise up a child in the way that they will go. So when they're old, they won't do what? So we have to do that. And at the same time, we have to understand what's creating it. I want to make sure that we have investments in affordable housing, because even the people who are teaching our children cannot afford to live here. Our Head Start workers are making barely above minimum wage. And I told y'all that there's no place in America, especially in the Bay Area, where you can afford a rental on minimum wage, and let's not even talk about buying a house. I can't buy a house, and I make over $100,000 a year. Student loans is a part of that. Come on, Biden. But public safety means people have access to affordable housing. That means they're not paying more than 30% of their income in rent or a mortgage. I believe we need safe streets where kids can actually ride their bikes or walk down the sidewalk to go to school. I saw a baby coming from West Oakland Middle School, riding his bike, trying to get to wherever he was going, but he couldn't get by because of an encampment that was straddling the bike lane as well as the sidewalk. That's a bunch of problems wrapped into one. He had to ride his bike into the street because he couldn't access the bike lane or the sidewalk. We were able, with the Community Ready Corps, to have the RV that was blocking the sidewalk move, and found out that the person that was living in the RV was my brother's former student at McClymonds High School. and he's permanently disabled because he was shot. And so he was like, I can't get work. I don't have access to medical care. So public safety to me means you have access to health care. You have access to housing. You have access to a good paying job. You can thrive in this city no matter what color, what age, anything. You can thrive and don't have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from. That's what public safety means to me. And until that's a community belief and a widely held belief, we're going to keep creating what we're creating. And so people try to get me caught up and have all kinds of zingers and be like, Carol wants to be soft on crime. Carol wants to nurture criminals. Carol just wants this kumbaya moment. I want things to be fair and just. And right now, they are fair and just for the wealthy. And the wealth of billionaires and millionaires has increased tenfold. And we're at a place we haven't seen that has surpassed the Gilded Era, right before the era right before the Great Depression. We have surpassed that in terms of wealth inequality in America. And honestly, if we don't get it together, there's only one way we can go. I am here to show that if we work together collectively and we have a vision for tomorrow, we can change course. But I'm very concerned about the misinformation that is happening on the media, a lot of it carried forward by people who look like me. The Oakland Police Department was not defunded. There are stats, figures, budgets that can show otherwise. But I was in a community meeting in Prescott a couple weeks ago that said, well, we wouldn't be having all this crime if you wouldn't have defunded the police in 2020. And I had to say, sir, that is quite irresponsible of you. As the chair of this meeting, I was not an elected official in 2020. Number one, would you allow me to share information with this group that corrects your misinformation? His answer, no. I'm not going to let you share that information. Oakland was defunded. Sir, no, it was not. In fact, the period that you're speaking of, the police received an increase in their budget from the year prior. And in fact, if we're talking about defunding, let's talk about the Department of Public Works. Let's talk about Parks and Recreation. Let's talk about the department that clears trees when they fall during during Oakland's worst winter storm. If we're talking about defunding, let's look at the vehicles that our Department of Public Works doesn't have anymore to clean up illegal dumping. So don't lie to the community about Oakland was singled out as a department that was defunded when it's the only department in the city that had their budget opened outside of their contract period to give them a raise and to give them incentives to come and work for the city of Oakland because of the attrition rate. Let's be honest. I can take criticism. I can take people who don't like my approach to community safety and community healing. But let's be honest. Oakland was not defunded. And in fact, the reality is for all city work, not just the police departments, but also engineers, everyone, people are not going into municipal work anymore. After COVID, things changed across the board. People don't want to go into work anymore. They want to work from home. And they don't want to take work for city jobs when they can make more in the private sector. People are not enlisting to be in our militaries anymore. People are not signing up to be police officers anymore. There's been a shift. So my point is, if we know we're not going to get the numbers, NAACP, stop calling for 1,200 officers on the street. People are not even signing up for the existing budgeted positions that we have right now for the Oakland Police Department. And if we know people are not going into law enforcement anymore, where can we invest? Where should we invest these dollars? My argument is the same as it's always been. Invest in these babies. Invest in our libraries. Invest in Head Start. Invest in our parks. Invest in affordable housing. Invest in the safety infrastructure for our streets that make it harder to speed and do donuts so that people are safe. That is also safety. And y'all hearing me today, if you disagree with me, meet me after this So you can tell me why, so we can figure out what needs to change. And my message, because I truly believe from the study and the research and the data that it is cheaper on the front end than it is on the back end, and we will all thrive collectively if we make those kind of investments. And we're getting up to a point in America where if we don't, we won't have any other choice. And you're hearing it now when people say, I don't care what it takes, hire more officers, whatever. That comes at a cost. There is a financial cost, and there's a cost-benefit analysis. Officers show up after, or maybe in Oakland, during an incident, if they show up. That's no slight. It's just that there's so much pain and so much trauma going on in the world. We do not have enough officers to put on every single corner and every single block in every single neighborhood in our city. Folks are saying, I don't care, just try it. That's not gonna work. Let's have some honest conversations. So if that's not gonna work, what else can we do? I gave some examples. If you disagree, let's talk about it. And have me come and talk to your neighborhood on your block. I will give you my cell phone number. We can sign up for times to have some community conversations, but we can keep each other safe while we're figuring out what some other things are we can do. In Denmark, when people go to jail and they go to prison, they give them organic food. This might sound like camp to y'all, but they try to change people's brain chemistry when you go to prison in Denmark. They rehabilitate. They really focus on rehabilitation, not just punishment. Because in America, and you go to prison, you get locked up, sometimes you come out worse than when you went in. And then on top of coming out worse, you have no access to financial aid. So if you wanted to improve your education, you cannot do that. You cannot get educated in schools, in our college system, because you are not eligible, because you have a record. You're not eligible for affordable housing through the housing and, through HUD and Oakland Housing Authority. So you can't get good education. You can't get a job because a lot of people want to know if you've been locked up before, and you can't access housing. What do we expect to happen when people who have gone into prison, who might have been low-level criminals, get hooked up and end up on drugs and come out with a habit or come out with no skills? What do we expect to happen? So there is something that we've got to do differently. And I'm sorry, Pastor, I keep going on these rants. And
No, that's perfectly fine.
I'm sorry.
But
I hope I answered your question.
You did answer my question and my next question as well, which is about what would you like to see us do our investments in to address public safety?
Well.
But what I like to do, hold that thought, because you made some very valid points with respect to this cry and demand for more police officers, and we are already understaffed. And I want to bring Omar into this discussion because this is something that he and I work on and oversee at the SSOC, as well as we mentioned about the 911 response, if they respond, if they take your call. I have people in this audience today, and many that are tuned in, who have had really bad experiences with 911 calls. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to bring Omar in, and you guys are going to have this quick little dialogue, and then I'll turn it back over to the hands of our moderator. Okay. Omar, you can sit right here. Come on. You good.
Okay, Omar.
I feel underdressed, but somewhere I heard some faith minister say, "Come as you are," so I didn't wear a suit.
No, you're perfectly fine.
Okay.
Omar is overdressed, and don't worry about it.
I'm always overdressed.
Question, Omar. I'd like for you just to address the issue as she was speaking on the staffing,
Right.
that you and I have had to review over the last 2 years with OPD. And then also, I'd like for you to tell into quickly the 911 system that we've been doing some research and gathering information on. And then I want to have a cross discussion real
Sure.
quickly and we'll be done.
Right. No, first of all, Councilmember Fife, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I agree with everything that you said, 100%. We definitely cannot police our way out of this situation. As far as staffing is concerned, OPD's, sorry, I got this throat thing. OPD's staffing has gotten so low at one point that it actually went below the requirement within Measure Z, which is below 678 officers. and they finally got back up to 720 officers or whatnot, and they have like 7 future police academies approved. But even then, they have a very high attrition rate. They lose anywhere between, even before COVID, they were losing 5 police officers per month, and now they lose somewhere between 5 and 8 officers per month. So just like Councilwoman Fife is pointing out, you know, a lot of people do not want to go into policing anymore and law enforcement in general. And even for the military, it's at the lowest recruiting numbers in the past several decades. And I'm a veteran, so I understand this problem. So there's, even if you wanted to find, you know, 900 police or 1,000 police to put them on the street, you wouldn't be able to, and we wouldn't have the funds to be able to pay for an academy. And even our academy has a very high attrition rate. They, on average, at the most, they can graduate around 30 people per academy class. So one thing that I've been kicking around as a potential idea for the SSOC to recommend to City Council, something that they do in places that have a Department of Public Safety, like the city of Sunnyvale, for example. They actually have public safety officers that cross-train to be both police officers and firefighters. So actually there's no shortage of people that want to be firefighters. So you could potentially try something like that in Oakland to try to fill in some of these gaps, to try to attract people to do public safety in Oakland. That's one example. And then as far as getting to the 911 response example, because we all know how ridiculous it is to try to get through the 911 system if you have an emergency. Our call center has been out of California Office of Emergency Services standards for several years for call answering times. They've gone from answering calls on average from 2 to 3 minutes to, I believe they're around like 55 seconds or something right now. But it's supposed to be 15 to 30 seconds total wait time, if anything. So recommendations that we have, one recommendation is, this is kind of technical talk, but is to update the burglary ordinance to require a new verified response requirement. So what that's talking about is 5% of the police call center volume is attributed to false burglary alarms. 98% of these burglary alarms are false alarms, and the police, they have to respond to them because they're mandated to. So they run around, they respond to these false alarms, and that amounts to 4.5 to 6.8 annual full-time employment OPD hours wasted per year. So just trying to close that gap would significantly help in improving our 911 response times. But we need to update the burglary ordinance to reflect this new verified response requirement, which we've been working on doing. I think you've heard us talk about that at our joint public safety meeting last year and the year before as well. And at this point, we're just waiting to get in front of the Public Safety Committee to make our official presentation for y'all to vote on it, and then for City Council to vote on it, and then to update the language in the burglary ordinance. So we're working on that. So that's one recommendation. Another way to help close the gap on these false burglary alarms is this new proprietary technology that uses artificial intelligence and I'm just trying to remember exactly how this works. Proprietary artificial intelligence and predictive algorithms to better detect when an actual burglary alarm is taking place. It's called ASAP to PSAP. This was recently approved for use in California. It's been used in several other states for several years, but for some reason, it's just now being approved in California at the end of June. In the city of Riverside, recently finished a pilot period. I talked to the person that implemented it. It's working as advertised. And what this technology does, instead of a human having to send a call for service to our 911 call center, the CAD display, which is the computer automated display for the actual call center for like the burglary, like ADT and all those people, they have like their own call center. Instead of them having to call our 911 call center, their CAD will speak directly to our police department CAD, and actually dispatch a call for service. So it could potentially eliminate this whole 5% of the call volume for the 911 call center, which would significantly, or at least reduce somewhat, the time that it's taken that people are on hold for 911 to improve our 911 response. So this is highly technical stuff. I don't actually work in these industries. I've just done this research, and we're making these recommendations to City Council to help us out. It's called ASAP to PSAP. You can come and check out previous SSOC meetings from July, and we talked about it at our last meeting. We're going to be talking about this stuff more at future meetings. Those are basically the main recommendations for improving our 911 response. Actually, the last one is making a better investment in developing macro. So macro is the Mobile Assistance Community Responders of Oakland. I got all that out. And what they do is primarily they can deal with a lot of the quality of life calls. So around, I think, 60% of the calls that the 911 call center receives are actually quality of life calls. They don't involve violent crime or anything. So, but macro is at the end of this 18-month pilot period, and they really haven't developed themselves enough to be able to take on these calls. And so we have a whole laundry list of things that we would like to see be improved so that macro can scale and be successful. And one of them involves in them actually having their own phone number, so you can call macro and request assistance if you see someone in mental health crisis, for example. So those are our three primary 911 improvement recommendations. And then one staffing recommendation that I'm probably going to talk about the next SSOC meeting. And yeah, that's it. If you have any questions.
Tell people to sign up. Yeah, clap. Go ahead. That was. And people should recommend that folks sign up to be 911 dispatchers. It's a good paying job. We have maybe about 16 vacancies, I believe, in the department. And yeah, we need people who love Oakland and care about Oakland to sign up. One of the things we don't do is we don't have a 911 academy. We don't have a dispatch academy, so it's a rolling basis. And that's I sat with 911 dispatchers a couple weekends ago and actually got to sit in on some of the calls. And I'm like, I know what I'm going to do when I leave City Hall. I'm going to be a 911 dispatcher or a preschool teacher. I don't know. But people can sign up right now, and I would encourage everyone to do that. Let your friends know.
Let's put our hands together for our panelists today. So today we've seen there's a broad spectrum of agencies that are working for public safety. We have heard today from the Department of Violence Prevention. We have heard from Ceasefire. We have heard from the SSOC, which oversees the Measure Z dollars that basically is designed to address public safety. We have heard from our excellent councilwoman about her vision and some of the underlying issues that's causing and driving crime in our city and how we can address it. As I close today, I just want to say this real briefly. So there's a lot of things that are being done, and I know we all want to see more done. So today, as I turn it back over to our organizers for this event today, let us start thinking, now that we see all these different pockets that are working, how can we plug into and tap into these resources? Our councilwoman is taking your comments and she's putting them together, and she's going to help us as we navigate through this, as we develop a strategy and a plan of action. The SSOC, we have clearly hearing from you guys, but we need you. When the new Measure Z comes up, or whatever it might be called, we need you so we can continue this work. Because if we didn't have these people who is here today doing what they're doing, I assure you, well, the conditions will be much, much worse. And then lastly, I want to say this. We have our Dr. Estes here and have Pastor Amy here. Clergy are going to be working around public safety issues. We're going to organize around public safety issues, and from a clergy perspective, what we can do. Because one of the things we realized recently, everyone heard about the mayhem that happened in Emeryville a month or so ago. They were able, the young people were able to network in 10 minutes and get 400 young folks at the theater in Emeryville. If they can get 400 folks over in Emeryville in 10 minutes, what can we do as adults, as parents, if we set up a network system, watch it, and help parent? It says it takes a village to raise a child. We knew something was going on in Emeryville, we get on the network, so when no kids show up, guess who's there? Not only the police, but we're there to run point. Y'all with me? So that's what we want to do. We want to talk about how can we step in. Everybody been saying we need to do more. No, first of all, we need to organize. Okay? Before you can be a strong activist, you need to be a strong organizer. Okay? So we need to organize ourselves so that if we decide, hey, if an issue comes up, we can get on a network and call each other, text each other, and we can respond and be on the scene as pastors, as leaders, as parents, as adults. Then we can turn the tide. Because we can't rely on the police to do this. This is something we're going to have to do. Because we understand our children, we understand our culture, and we know how far they have drifted. And if they can organize in 10 minutes and get 400 kids, I say, in Emeryville at a theater, why couldn't we as parents be on the scene if we had the same type of network channels? So let's talk about organizing and creating a network channel. At this time, we turn it back into the hands of our most able organizer today.
Okay, everybody. I'm going to continue to say thank you, but I do want to say thank you to everybody. As we say in church, the hour has been well spent. So we are a little past our closing time, but I want to just give it up one more time for our amazing panelists. And then I would love for you all to give it up for yourselves, because we have championed through this day. We have made it. We have made great strides. We have had great communication. I feel like we've done a little bit more to widen that circle of belonging and build community. I hope that there is a part of today that was impactful for you and that you'll take with you. In closing, I always like to do optimistic closure. I like to go head, heart, and feet. So just thinking about something that you are thinking about today, something that's resonating with you, something that you're going to carry in your heart from today. And then the feet part is the action, right? Boots to the ground. What actions are we going to take going forward as we leave from this place, right? And we continue to do this work. We had question and answer, but really we're just going to close, and then if you have questions, feel free to stay, convene, talk. We also have additional food downstairs, so if anybody is still hungry or if you want to take some food with you, please go downstairs and grab a plate to go. And other than that, I believe that we are done. So once again, thank you all so much, and I appreciate you all. Have a good rest of your Saturday.
Everyone have a great day. Thank you for coming, and then look forward to hearing from us as we continue on our organizing path. Thank you. Again, to our organizer, Chris Logan of Faith in Action East Bay, let's put our hands together for Brother Chris. Okay. Sir. But we can set something up and have them come over there. Okay, and it'll be perfect at your church too. Sir. No, she's right there. Yeah, she just said she's looking for some work or something. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I told her to talk right now. Hey, so did you guys just talk your situation?
Yes. Yeah, I got her information, so I'm gonna be in touch with her.
Okay.
So thank you.
Appreciate you, man. All right, my brother.
Nice meeting you, Doc. Take care.
Miss Lane, where are you? Hey, sir. Appreciate you, man. Awesome job. Awesome.
I'd love to do this again with you more reviews or
Yes.
just let me know.
Okay. I definitely will. We're gonna be doing. We got a couple more we're planning out for the rest of the year. Okay. I mean, this is really good, though. I think people learned a lot of that. That's good information. We'll talk to this guy again. Appreciate you, man. Awesome job, bro. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Lane, where are you? I need you to come over and shut everything down.